It was 11:45 p.m. on a Friday, and the relentless New York rain was violently lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 50th floor. Manhattan below was a sea of glittering, unforgiving lights, a stark reminder of how small I really was. As an ordinary alpha born and raised in a cramped, drafty apartment in Queens, I shouldn't have been here this late. My bank account barely covered my rent, my subway pass, and my student loans. I couldn't afford to lose this job. But my survival in this ruthless financial empire depended entirely on the man whose office sat at the end of the dark corridor, Harrison Sterling. He was the CEO, the undisputed enigma of Wall Street, and the absolute bane of my existence. Just 8 hours ago, he had publicly eviscerated me in the grand conference room over a minor miscalculation in the Q3 risk assessment report. His pheromones, a chilling dominant blend of dark espresso and sharp winter pine, had suffocated the room, making my own mediocre alpha instincts scream in submission. Now I was dragging my exhausted body toward his private suite to drop off the revised paperwork, silently praying to whatever gods were listening that he had already gone back to his luxury penthouse. The hallway was dead silent. I clutched the manila folder so tightly my knuckles turned white. My plan was simple and foolproof: slide the report under his door, run to the subway, and collapse onto my cheap mattress. But as I neared the massive mahogany double doors, I noticed a sliver of warm light spilling out onto the thick carpet. The door wasn't fully closed. And then I heard it. A faint trembling sound echoing from inside the room. Was that a sob? I froze, my hand hovering awkwardly over the brass handle. Intermingled with the soft sniffing was the unmistakable dramatic string music of a movie soundtrack. Curiosity, that fatal human flaw, overtook my basic survival instincts. I nudged the heavy door open just a fraction more and peered inside. What I saw in that dimly lit office completely shattered my understanding of the universe. Sitting cross-legged on the custom-made Italian leather sofa was the terrifying, cold-blooded enigma who controlled billions of dollars with a wave of his hand. But he wasn't wearing his signature three-piece Tom Ford suit. No, Harrison Sterling was engulfed in a ridiculously oversized, violently pink pajama set. And slapped right across the chest of that fluffy monstrosity was a massive, winking Hello Kitty face. My jaw practically unhinged. On the massive flat-screen TV usually reserved for monitoring global stock markets, Ryan Gosling was passionately screaming in the pouring rain in a famous scene from The Notebook. Harrison, the man who had ruthlessly fired 3 senior executives before lunch just last week, was clutching a velvet throw pillow, his broad shoulders shaking as he aggressively blew his nose into a tissue. His immaculate golden hair was a messy bird's nest, and his normally piercing icy blue eyes were red-rimmed and brimming with tears. I was so paralyzed by the sheer absurdity of the situation that my brain stopped functioning. Then the worst possible thing happened. The folder slipped from my sweaty grip and hit the hardwood floor with a resounding smack. A sharp sound echoed in the quiet room. The dramatic movie dialogue was suddenly drowned out by a deafening, terrifying silence. Harrison's head snapped toward the door. Through the gap, his tear-filled eyes locked directly onto mine. For a split second, I saw absolute, unadulterated panic flash across his handsome face. But then, the enigma instincts violently kicked in. Even dressed like a giant fuzzy strawberry marshmallow, the sheer crushing weight of his pheromones flooded the room, heavy and suffocating like a winter avalanche. My knees instantly went weak. My alpha pride, which normally told me to stand my ground, completely withered under the biological pressure. I pushed the door open, raising my hands in a desperate, trembling gesture of surrender. "Mr. Sterling, I swear I didn't see anything. I just brought the report." "Shut the door." His voice was hoarse and thick from crying, yet it still carried the undeniable, dangerous authority of an apex predator. I scrambled inside, kicking the door shut behind me, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. He was going to fire me. He was going to blacklist me from every financial firm in America. Maybe he would just throw me out the 50th floor window. "Open your eyes, Matthew." I slowly opened my eyes. Harrison had stood up. He was a towering 6'3", and the Hello Kitty pajamas somehow made his imposing figure look even more menacing. He grabbed a remote, pausing the movie right at the kiss scene, and then pointed a long, accusatory finger at me. He sniffled once desperately, trying to maintain his icy CEO facade, while a rogue tear tracked down his cheek. You," he ordered, his tone deadly serious, "are going to the executive kitchen, and you're going to make me a bowl of mac and cheese, the cheap boxed kind. Right now." I stared at him, my mind completely short-circuiting, an enigma in pink pajamas demanding comfort food at midnight. "And Matthew," he added, stepping closer, his winter pine scent wrapped around my throat like a physical warning. "If you ever breathe a single word of this to anyone, I will personally ensure your remains are scattered across the Hudson River." I stood there rooted to the plush carpet. The contrast was so sharp it almost gave me whiplash. I looked at his red, puffy eyes, then down at the bright pink cartoon cat sitting squarely on his chest. An invisible heavy wall between us had just developed a massive pink crack. My fear suddenly melted into something bizarrely akin to amusement. "Yes, boss," I muttered, unable to stop the slight twitch at the corner of my mouth. "Do you want extra cheese with that?" If anyone had told me that knowing a Wall Street billionaire's deepest, pinkest secret would result in my becoming his unofficial babysitter, I would have laughed in their face. Yet here I was, living a bizarre double life that felt like an extended fever dream. During office hours, Harrison Sterling was the undisputed king of the financial district. In the glass-walled boardrooms of Manhattan, he was a ruthless enigma. He wore custom-tailored suits that cost more than my annual rent in Queens, and his pheromones, that sharp, dominating blend of dark espresso and winter pine, were kept on a tight, intimidating leash. Whenever we crossed paths in the corporate hallways, he looked right through me. To the rest of the company, Matthew, the junior financial analyst, was practically invisible. But the moment the clock struck 6, the illusion shattered. My cheap smartphone would buzz with a text from an unsaved number, south entrance of Central Park. 15 minutes. Don't be late. I sighed, adjusting the collar of my worn-out trench coat against the brisk New York wind. When I arrived, Harrison was waiting near a food cart. His idea of a disguise was a $3,000 cashmere coat paired with a pristine New York Yankees baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He looked exactly like a billionaire trying to blend in with the peasants. "Buy me one of those," he commanded, pointing a gloved finger at the hot dog cart. "Mr. Sterling, you have a private Michelin star chef. That sausage has been floating in lukewarm water since the Bush administration," I replied, crossing my arms. "I am the CEO, Matthew. Do as you're told." He huffed, his blue eyes narrowing playfully beneath the brim of his cap. I rolled my eyes, handed the vendor a crumpled $5 bill, and passed him the foil-wrapped hot dog. Harrison stared at it like it was an alien artifact, complained about the excessive mustard, critiqued the structural integrity of the bun, and then proceeded to inhale the entire thing in 4 massive bites. A spot of mustard landed on his chin, and I had to suppress a laugh as I handed him a napkin. The terrifying predator of Wall Street was currently licking his fingers like a golden retriever. This absurd routine extended to his home. His penthouse in Tribeca was a sprawling multi-million-dollar masterpiece of cold marble minimalist glass and modern art that looked like it belonged in a museum. It felt sterile, empty, and entirely devoid of warmth. But once those heavy steel doors locked behind us, the enigma shed his armor. Out came the pastel hoodies. Out came the ridiculous, oversized sweatpants. My new job description, essentially a hostage situation disguised as a hush-hush contract, required me to cook the cheap, comforting meals his personal chef refused to make. Afterward, I was obligated to sit exactly 2 feet away from him on a $20,000 Italian leather sofa. Tonight, it was a painfully cheesy Hallmark Christmas movie in the middle of October. I sat there deadpan, staring at the screen as the female lead, a career-driven city woman, realized her true love was the flannel-wearing small-town baker. Right on cue, the emotional acoustic guitar music swelled. Without even looking, I pulled a tissue from the box and held it out. Harrison snatched it. It is just the way he looked at her when she dropped the cupcakes, he sniffled, dabbing at his eyes. "It is a cinematic masterpiece, boss," I deadpanned, stretching my legs out. "Listen, I need to use the restroom. And I need to find more tissues before the baker proposes in the snow." Hallway, second door on the left. Harrison croaked, his eyes glued to the TV screen. I navigated the pristine, monochromatic hallway, the sound of the movie fading slightly. I reached the door, turned the sleek silver handle, and pushed it open. It was a massive, temperature-controlled bedroom entirely dedicated to plushies. I stood frozen in the doorway. Floor-to-ceiling custom shelving units were packed with giant teddy bears, pastel-colored squishmallows, fluffy blankets, and a literal mountain of Hello Kitty merchandise. There was a giant beanbag chair shaped like a strawberry in the center of the room. The contrast between the cold, hyper-masculine penthouse and this secret pastel wonderland was so staggering, I forgot how to breathe. Suddenly, a massive shadow loomed over me. Harrison was standing in the doorway, his broad frame blocking the hall light. The sharp warning scent of winter pine spiked violently in the air, a knee-jerk enigma reaction to his most private territory being breached. The sheer biological weight of it made my neck glands tingle in alarm. My alpha instincts flared, demanding I step back, but I forced my feet to stay planted. I braced myself. I expected him to yell, to threaten to fire me, to unleash the terrifying wrath I saw in the boardroom. Instead, the suffocating pheromones receded as quickly as they had appeared. Harrison slumped his shoulders. He rubbed the back of his neck, the tips of his ears burning a furious bright red. He refused to meet my eyes. The housekeeper, she puts the PR gifts in the wrong room. He muttered, his voice barely a whisper. It was the worst lie I had ever heard in my entire life. I looked at this terrifying, incredibly powerful man. He could ruin my career with a single phone call. He commanded thousands of employees. Yet he couldn't figure out how to use his own microwave. He cried over fictional bakers, and he apparently needed a room full of stuffed animals to cope with the crushing pressure of his life. A strange, unfamiliar warmth bloomed in my chest, softening the edges of my anxiety. The paralyzing fear I once held for him began to quietly dissolve. I reached out, gently pulling the door shut with a soft click, and offered him a small, genuine smile. "Right, the housekeeper," I said softly. "Come on, you are going to miss the proposal." He wasn't just a ruthless enigma anymore. He was just Harrison, and God help me, the man was actually starting to grow on me. By mid-November, the biting Manhattan chill had fully settled over the city, and my life had settled into a rhythm so bizarrely domestic that I stopped questioning it. The invisible wall between the ruthless CEO and the junior analyst was slowly being dismantled brick by pink brick. At the office, Harrison maintained his terrifying enigma persona flawlessly. He still fired people without blinking, still commanded boardrooms with an iron fist, and his pheromones remained a suffocating, icy warning to anyone who dared cross him. But subtly, the tectonic plates of our professional relationship had shifted. He stopped ignoring me. More importantly, he started trusting me. It started with a plain black folder dropped unceremoniously onto my desk late one Tuesday evening. No sticky notes, no verbal instructions, just a highly confidential file for a potential corporate acquisition, an analysis task usually reserved for senior VPs. I spent 3 sleepless nights dissecting the financials fueled by cheap bodega coffee, determined to prove that I was more than just his late-night mac and cheese chef. When I handed my report back, he read it in silence, his blue eyes scanning the pages. He gave a single curt nod. The next day, my financial models were the backbone of his winning pitch. We never spoke about it, but the mutual respect silently cemented itself. I was no longer just the alpha who knew his secret, I was becoming his right-hand man. But our real communication didn't happen through corporate spreadsheets. It happened through yellow post-it notes. Because my evenings were now frequently held hostage by the Hallmark Channel, I found myself involuntarily invested in the terrible, cheesy plot lines. I even started watching episodes on my phone during my crowded morning subway commutes from Queens just to keep up. Knowing how packed and stressful Harrison's daily schedule was, I began leaving him subtle warnings. The first time I did it, I slipped a small neon yellow sticky note inside a heavily guarded Q4 revenue report right before a massive board meeting. Spoiler alert for tonight. The female lead gets amnesia in a tragic snowmobile accident. Try not to cry during the merger presentation. M. I sat at the far end of the sprawling glass conference table holding my breath as Harrison casually opened the folder in front of 12 intimidating shareholders. He paused. For a terrifying second, I thought I had crossed the line. But then, as he read my chicken scratch, the icy, impenetrable enigma mask slipped. Just for a fraction of a second, the corner of his mouth twitched upward into a genuine, impossibly soft smile. He discreetly peeled the note off, slipped it into his tailored suit pocket, and seamlessly proceeded to ruthlessly tear apart a rival company's valuation. From my seat at the back, my heart gave a sudden treacherous flutter. It became our secret language. Amidst billion-dollar contracts and cutthroat negotiations, there were tiny yellow squares of paper. The golden retriever dies in episode 4. I bought the ultra-soft tissues. Brace yourself. Or, I know the market crashed today. but the baker finally proposed. We are having pizza tonight to celebrate. The dynamic at the Tribeca penthouse shifted entirely. The forced hostage-like tension evaporated, replaced by a comfortable, companionable silence. I was no longer sitting 2 feet away, out of obligation. We shared the massive Italian leather sofa naturally. He would sit on one end, his long legs stretched out, reviewing legal documents while wrapped in a fluffy pastel blanket. I would sit on the other reading financial reports. Sometimes the exhaustion of running a financial empire would catch up to him. He would fall asleep halfway through a movie, his head tilting back against the cushions. In those quiet moments, stripped of his tailored armor, he didn't look like a Wall Street predator. He looked incredibly human. He looked exhausted, lonely, and burdened by a level of elite pressure I could barely comprehend. The overwhelming scent of winter pine and dark espresso that usually commanded the office would mellow out in the penthouse, softening into something warm, grounded, and intensely comforting. It mixed with the rain hitting the glass and the quiet hum of the city below. I would carefully pull the blanket over his broad shoulders, my alpha instincts no longer screaming in defense but humming with a strange, quiet urge to protect him. The wake-up call hit me on a Sunday morning far away from the glittering skyscrapers of Manhattan. I was in my own world, wandering the glaringly bright, fluorescent-lit aisles of a Walmart in Queens, looking for discounted laundry detergent. It was loud, crowded, and perfectly ordinary. As I pushed my squeaky shopping cart past the home goods section, a splash of bright color caught my eye. I stopped. Sitting on the bottom shelf was a ceramic, obnoxiously pink Hello Kitty mug. I stood in the middle of the aisle, staring at it. Unbidden, an image flashed into my mind. Harrison Sterling, a 6'3" powerhouse of a man sitting at his $1 million kitchen island, dwarfing this tiny, ridiculous mug with his massive hands, sipping cheap hot cocoa with a totally serious expression. Before I could stop it, a massive, foolish grin spread across my face. I stood there smiling like an absolute idiot at a piece of cheap merchandise. Then my stomach dropped. The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. I wasn't just tolerating him anymore. I wasn't just doing my job. The boundary of a safe, professional friendship had completely shattered. Oh God, I thought a wave of panic washing over me as I picked up the pink mug and placed it gently into my cart. I am falling for a Wall Street shark. December arrived in New York with a brutal, biting frost, but the chill inside the Manhattan corporate office was far worse. The whispers started in the break room and spread like a venomous virus through the glass corridors. Did you hear about Matthew? A junior analyst suddenly handling executive portfolios. He must be servicing the CEO. The rumors were spearheaded by Anderson, a senior VP who was furious that my financial models had outperformed his. To prove a point, Anderson conveniently misplaced a crucial data partition for my latest project, leaving me humiliated and scrambling during a midweek briefing. But the corporate sabotage wasn't what broke me. It was the suffocating, terrifying guilt. The rumors hit a raw, exposed nerve because deep down I knew my professional boundaries were completely compromised. I wasn't sleeping with hegemony, but I was doing something far more dangerous. I was falling in love with him. Every time I looked at his cold, commanding face in a meeting, all I could see was the man wrapped in a pink blanket crying over fictional bakers. I felt like a fraud. Unable to bear the suffocating weight of the gossip and my own escalating feelings, I made the only logical choice for a practical working-class alpha. Late Wednesday night, I logged into the HR portal and drafted a formal request for an immediate transfer to the Chicago branch. I saved it as a draft, planning to submit it in the morning, and took the subway back to Queens, my chest feeling like it was packed with wet cement. At 2:30 a.m., a frantic heavy pounding on my flimsy apartment door jolted me awake. The freezing wind was howling outside, rattling my cheap windows. I stumbled out of bed, grabbing a baseball bat, assuming my drunk landlord was on another rampage. I squinted through the peephole, and my blood ran completely cold. I threw the door open. Harrison was standing in the dimly lit, dingy hallway of my building. He looked absolutely wrecked. He wasn't wearing a coat, just a wrinkled, expensive cashmere sweater that was soaked from the sleet. His golden hair was a disheveled mess plastered to his forehead. But it was the scent that hit me first. The normally controlled, sharp winter pine and dark espresso pheromones were completely unhinged. They were wild, feverish, and suffocatingly thick, flooding my tiny hallway like a tidal wave. It was an enigma heat cycle, Biology dictated that an enigma in heat was a terrifying, aggressive force of nature, driven by an insatiable need to conquer and claim. My alpha instinct screamed at me to brace for an impact to protect my territory. But Harrison didn't attack. Instead, his knees buckled. I dropped the bat and caught him just before he hit the linoleum floor. He was burning up a literal furnace of feverish desperation. Before I could even speak, his massive arms wrapped around my waist with a crushing, terrified grip. He buried his face deep into the crook of my neck, inhaling my scent like a drowning man finding oxygen. "Don't go," he choked out his voice, a broken, ragged sob. "Matthew, please, don't go to Chicago." He had seen the HR draft. The corporate system flagged executive transfers to the CEO. "Harrison, you are freezing. You are in heat. What are you doing here?" I stammered, using all my strength to drag his 6'3" deadweight frame inside my tiny living room. I kicked the door shut and managed to maneuver him onto my lumpy second-hand sofa. He didn't let go of me. He pulled me down with him, dragging my worn-out faded fleece blanket off the back of the couch and pulling it over both our heads. He curled his massive body inward, making himself as small as physically possible, pressing his face into my chest. He was shaking uncontrollably, weeping with an intensity that completely shattered my heart. There was no apex predator here, just a terrified, clingy, desperately insecure man. They locked me in the dark. He whispered deliriously, his tears soaking right through my cheap cotton t-shirt. His pheromones were swirling frantically, begging for comfort. When I was a kid, if I cried, if I wanted a toy, my father locked me in the study. He told me enigmas do not feel. We rule. He said softness was a disease. He let out a ragged breath, his fingers gripping the fabric of my shirt so tightly his knuckles were white. I had to be perfect. I had to be made of ice. But I just wanted someone to hold me, Matthew. I just wanted something soft. And then I found you, and you did not laugh at me. You stayed. You made me mac and cheese. You warned me about the sad movies. He looked up at me, his icy blue eyes wide and bloodshot, brimming with raw, unfiltered agony. "If you leave for Chicago, I will have nothing left. Please, I will be good. I won't yell at the board. Just don't leave me alone in the dark again." The Hello Kitty pajamas, the secret room of plushies, the brutal Wall Street persona, it all suddenly made devastating, heartbreaking sense. The heir to a financial empire was just a starved, traumatized child trapped in a billionaire's body, terrified of his own humanity. All my insecurities, all the nasty office rumors, all the fears of our class divide instantly evaporated. I stopped fighting my own biology. I let down my guard completely and released my own alpha pheromones. It wasn't anything spectacular or intimidating, just the warm, grounding scent of roasted coffee beans and old parchment. But to Harrison, it was an anchor. I wrapped my arms tightly around his broad, shaking shoulders, pulling him flush against my chest. I buried one hand in his damp, golden hair, gently stroking the nape of his neck, right over his heat-swollen glands, offering the ultimate vulnerable submission of comfort. "I am not going to Chicago," I whispered fiercely, pressing a kiss to the crown of his head. "I am right here, Harrison. I have got you. You are safe." The weeping titan let out a long, shuddering sigh, his desperate sobs finally quieting as he melted into my embrace, completely surrendering his empire for the safety of a cheap futon in Queens. The morning after the storm, the suffocating fever finally broke. Harrison woke up on my cramped, lumpy futon, his massive frame looking utterly out of place in my dingy Queens apartment, yet bizarrely at peace. I didn't say a single word about the tears, the desperate confessions, or the childhood trauma. I simply handed him a mug of cheap drip coffee, booted up my battered laptop, and deliberately deleted the Chicago transfer draft right in front of him. I was staying. I liked the terrifying, ruthless Wall Street titan, and God help me, I loved the weeping, traumatized enigma in the Hello Kitty pajamas. It was a terrifying realization that completely upended my practical working-class life, but there was no turning back now. When we returned to the glass and steel battleground of Manhattan the following Monday, the shift in Harrison was palpable. The ridiculous hush-hush contract excuses vanished. He no longer pretended he was forcing me to hang out with him to protect his secret. More importantly, he unleashed a surgical terrifying wrath upon those who had dared to target me. Anderson, the senior VP, who had sabotaged my project and spread the malicious rumors about me sleeping my way to the top, was systematically dismantled. Within 48 hours, Anderson's corporate accounts were thoroughly audited, his elite client list was stripped away, and he was quietly but brutally escorted out of the building by security. Harrison executed it all from his CEO chair with a chilling, expressionless efficiency. It should have terrified me to witness such ruthless corporate slaughter. Instead, watching the apex predator of Wall Street ruthlessly secure my perimeter made my chest ache with a profound, dizzying warmth. But reality in New York is never kind to fairy tales, and the illusion of our safe little bubble violently popped on a bleak Thursday afternoon. I was approaching the executive suite to deliver a quarterly projection when I felt an overwhelming, crushing pressure in the corridor. It wasn't Harrison's familiar winter pine. It was an older, heavier, far more suffocating scent, aged oak and bitter tobacco. It was the scent of absolute old money authority. Richard Sterling, the chairman of the board, Harrison father. The heavy mahogany door to the CEO's office was slightly ajar, and the booming, uncompromising voice echoing from inside stopped me dead in my tracks. "You are the heir to the Sterling Empire." Harrison, his father voice, ground out heavy with aristocratic disdain. "I do not care about your recent corporate acquisitions or how much profit you generated this quarter. The board requires long-term stability. Senator Hayes has a daughter, an impeccably bred Omega with the right pedigree. The engagement announcement will be finalized and sent to the press by Christmas. This is not a request, it is your duty. Do not embarrass this family." I stood completely frozen in the hallway, clutching my tablet so hard my fingers ached. In any cheesy drama, this would be the exact moment the underdog protagonist drops their papers, bursts into dramatic tears, and runs away into the freezing rain, convinced they were never good enough to fit into the elite world. But I wasn't a fragile, dramatic protagonist. I was a stubborn, pragmatic alpha from Queens who had held a weeping enigma through his heat cycle. I knew the man beneath the billionaire armor, so I did not run. I stayed firmly planted on the thick carpet, holding my breath, waiting to hear the only voice that actually mattered. There was a long, excruciating silence. The air in the office felt thick enough to choke on. Then Harrison's voice, remarkably calm and dripping with absolute frost, cut through the heavy tension. "I will manage my own personal affairs, Richard. You can tell Senator Hayes to look elsewhere. I am not marrying her." I exhaled a long, shaky breath, stepping back quietly toward the elevators before the chairman could storm out. That night, the atmosphere between us was thicker than the biting December air. We weren't hiding in the pastel-colored room of plushies or watching a predictable movie on his couch. Harrison bypassed the penthouse entirely and brought me up to the private rooftop terrace of the corporate tower. The sprawling, neon-lit grid of Manhattan lay hundreds of feet beneath us, a glittering billion-dollar kingdom that Harrison ruled with an iron fist. The wind howled around us, biting aggressively at my cheeks. We stood side by side, leaning against the thick glass parapet, our shoulders brushing. The silence between us was heavy, simmering with unsaid words and the lingering shadow of his father's suffocating ultimatum. "He wants you to marry an Omega." I finally broke the silence, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rapid, nervous hammering of my heart. "A senator daughter, someone who actually makes sense for a Sterling." Harrison didn't look at me. He kept his gaze fixed on the dazzling city lights below. The winter pine scent surrounding him wasn't aggressive or dominant. It was hesitant, almost incredibly vulnerable. "My father has spent my entire life telling me what makes sense," Harrison said quietly, his breath forming a white cloud in the freezing air. "He built a perfect ice-cold cage and called it an empire." He finally turned his head to look at me. His blue eyes were incredibly dark in the moonlight, entirely stripped of their corporate armor. Slowly, deliberately, he moved his hand along the freezing metal railing until his fingers brushed against mine. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't hesitate. He just slipped his massive, warm hand over my calloused one, intertwining our fingers with a firm, uncompromising grip. It was a simple, quiet gesture, but coming from an enigma of his terrifying status, it was an absolute world-shifting declaration. My breath hitched in my throat. I looked down at our joined hands, then out at the glittering, untouchable expanse of Wall Street. I was just Matthew. My bank account was a joke my suits were bought off the rack, and my bloodline meant absolutely nothing in this city. Did a nobody alpha from a tiny apartment in Queens really have the right to hold the hand of the enigma who owned Manhattan? Harrison squeezed my fingers tighter as if he could hear the loud, insecure thoughts racing through my head, anchoring me to him in the freezing New York night. And as the profound warmth of his palm seeped into my skin, the fear melted away, and I realized I no longer cared about the answer. The final week of the fiscal year was my absolute battlefield. With Anderson gone and the toxic corporate rumors quietly dying down, I poured every ounce of my stubborn working-class grit into the Q4 merger analysis. When the day of the final presentation arrived, I did not stand in the corner like a terrified junior analyst. I stood at the head of the sprawling glass conference table, laser pointer in hand, and ruthlessly dismantled the opposing firm's valuation with bulletproof financial models. When I finished, there was a stunned silence followed by the slow, undeniable nodding of the most conservative shareholders. I hadn't used Harrison protection to secure my job. I had used my own intellect. I was not the CEO charity case. I had earned my seat at the table. But the real trial of the day didn't happen in the boardroom. It happened 20 minutes later when a terrifyingly stoic executive assistant intercepted me in the hallway and directed me to a private soundproof lounge on the top floor. When the door clicked shut behind me, the heavy, suffocating scent of aged oak and bitter tobacco filled the room. Chairman Richard Sterling was standing by the window, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. I instantly braced myself. This was it, the climax of every cheap drama I had ever watched. I fully expected him to pull out a gold-plated checkbook slide, a piece of paper with a ridiculous number across the table, and demand I leave his heir alone. I squared my shoulders, ready to tell the billionaire chairman exactly where he could shove his money. "Sit down," Matthew Richards said, his voice devoid of its usual booming authority. He didn't turn around right away. I remained standing. "With all due respect, sir, if this is about the senator daughter." I knew about the pink toys, Richard interrupted softly. The air in my lungs completely vanished. I stared at his broad back, utterly paralyzed. The chairman finally turned to face me, and for the first time, he didn't look like an untouchable corporate god. He looked like an incredibly tired, aging father. He walked over to the mahogany desk, leaning heavily against it. "I found his secret stash when he was 12. Richard continued, his voice remarkably quiet, carrying a profound weight of regret. "Enigmas are born to conquer, Matthew. The world is brutal to weakness, and Wall Street is a slaughterhouse. I thought if I allowed him to hold on to those soft, childish things, the sharks would smell the blood and tear him apart. So I locked him in the dark. I forced him to become a machine made of ice." Richard looked down at his hands, a bitter smile touching his lips. "I successfully built a ruthless CEO for my empire, but I completely broke my son. And the worst part was I did not know how to fix him." He looked up, his sharp eyes meeting mine. The suffocating enigma pheromones in the room softened into something apologetic. "I investigated you, Matthew. I expected a gold digger. Instead, I found a stubborn alpha making a fraction of his worth, who somehow managed to look at my terrifying son in a Hello Kitty pajama shirt and didn't run away. You gave him the safe harbor I destroyed." Richard stepped forward and extended his hand. "I'm stepping back from the board. Harrison's personal life is his own. Thank you for accepting him." I was so profoundly shocked, I barely remembered shaking his hand. By the time I took the subway back to my cramped apartment in Queens that evening, my brain was still struggling to process the monumental shift in my reality. I unlocked my peeling front door, shrugged off my wet coat, and walked into my tiny kitchen to brew a pot of cheap, bitter drip coffee. Just as the machine began to sputter, a firm, familiar knock echoed through the apartment. I opened the door. Harrison stood in the dimly lit hallway. He was wearing a simple dark trench coat, his golden hair slightly damp from the evening mist. He looked entirely stripped of his corporate armor, carrying a small cardboard box. "I told Senator Hayes to go to hell," Harrison announced, plainly stepping into my living room without waiting for an invitation. "I also informed the board that any attempt to micromanage my personal life will result in my immediate resignation and the liquidation of my shares." "Harrison, your father," I started. "Already knows," he cut me off, setting the box down on my cheap coffee table. He turned to me, his blue eyes burning with an intense, unyielding sincerity. "I do not need a flawless omega with a political pedigree. I do not need a strategic corporate alliance. I need the man who makes me boxed mac and cheese at midnight. I need the man who leaves yellow sticky notes on my billion-dollar contracts to warn me about sad movies. He closed the distance between us in 2 long strides, his massive hands gently cupping my face. His thumbs brushed over my cheekbones, his touch unbelievably soft for a man of his size. "I do not want to hide in a secret room anymore," Harrison whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to be in the light with you. I love you, Matthew." All the practical, logical defenses I had built up over 30 years completely shattered. I didn't say it back with words. I grabbed the lapels of his coat, pulled him down to my height, and kissed him. Harrison let out a sharp gasp before his arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against his solid chest. The kiss wasn't a tentative, dramatic movie moment. It was deep, desperate, and overwhelmingly real. The terrifying, icy scent of winter pine and dark espresso completely melted, tangling beautifully with my own humble scent of roasted coffee. Standing there in my cramped, dingy Queens kitchen, kissing the most powerful enigma in New York, I finally felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Exactly 1 year had passed since the night the icy enigma of Wall Street showed up at my peeling front door in Queens, completely unraveling my pragmatic, carefully guarded life. A lot can change in 365 days. For starters, I wasn't a terrified junior analyst desperately crunching numbers to avoid being fired anymore. I was now a senior portfolio manager running my own division. I hadn't used Harrison name to get there. I had used the bulletproof financial instincts I'd honed through years of scraping by. I no longer walked the glass corridors of Manhattan with my head down. I was an alpha who knew his own worth, confident in my own skin, and firmly grounded in the empire I was helping to build. But the most profound transformation wasn't mine. It was Harrison. He was still the undisputed king of the financial district, but he had finally learned to take off the heavy, suffocating crown. He delegated authority. He stopped working 100-hour weeks. And, to the absolute shock of the entire corporate board, the terrifying CEO had actually started smiling during Monday morning briefings. He had stopped living like an ice-cold machine and finally allowed himself to be a beautifully flawed, breathing human being. We had compromised on our living situation. His Tribeca penthouse was a sterile museum, and my Queens apartment was a literal shoebox, so we met in the middle. We bought a sprawling, sun-drenched brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. It wasn't impeccably minimalist. It was messy warm and unapologetically ours. It was the Sunday morning following Thanksgiving, and the crisp, biting New York winter had frosted the large window panes of our home. The golden morning light poured in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I was standing in our spacious, slightly chaotic kitchen, wearing a faded college t-shirt, wrestling with the colossal leftover Thanksgiving turkey. I was determined to make the ultimate holiday brunch a massive spread of roasted turkey hash, garlic potatoes, and freshly brewed coffee. The rich, savory aroma filled the entire house, mingling perfectly with the natural, grounded scent of my roasted coffee bean pheromones. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and glanced up, looking through the glass doors that led to the terrace. There he was. Harrison Sterling, the billionaire enigma who could manipulate the global stock market with a single phone call, was standing on the freezing sunlit balcony. He was wearing gray sweatpants, a plain white long-sleeve shirt, and strapped firmly over his broad 6'3" chest was a violently pink, aggressively ruffled Hello Kitty apron. He was holding a small pastel blue watering can, meticulously hydrating a row of potted succulents with the same intense, terrifying focus he used to dismantle rival corporations. He had named the plants. The spiky aloe vera was named Anderson exclusively, so Harrison could threaten to throw it off the balcony if it didn't grow right. Watching him, my chest tightened with a profound, overwhelming warmth. Society had so many rigid, suffocating rules. Enigmas were supposed to be heartless conquerors. Omegas were supposed to be soft and submissive. Alphas were supposed to be fiercely dominant and aggressively independent. The elite class was supposed to stay behind their velvet ropes, and the working class was supposed to stay in the shadows. We had broken every single rule, shattered every expectation, and built our own kind of paradise in the wreckage. I realized then what true courage actually was. Bravery wasn't about being the loudest or the most ruthless person in the boardroom. True bravery was having the absolute strength to strip away your perfect, indestructible armor and show the softest, most vulnerable parts of your soul to someone else. It was about trusting someone with your tears, your fears, and your deepest secrets. And love was the quiet rebellion of reaching out and taking the hand of the person you wanted, completely ignoring the prejudices of gender biology and bank accounts. From the living room behind me, the television was softly playing. I'd left it on a marathon of classic holiday films, and the familiar sweeping orchestral soundtrack of a Christmas movie suddenly swelled, filling the house with a nostalgic, festive melody. Out on the balcony, Harrison heard the music. He paused, setting the pastel watering can down on the brick ledge. The cold winter breeze ruffled his golden hair as he turned around and looked through the glass. When his icy blue eyes found me standing by the stove, his face completely transformed. He flashed a breathtaking, incredibly genuine smile, a smile that was entirely exclusively mine. He opened the glass door, bringing a rush of crisp winter air inside, but his massive body was a furnace of warmth. His enigma pheromones, the winter pine and dark espresso, were no longer suffocating or dominant. They were sweet, mellow, and impossibly safe. He walked straight into the kitchen, wrapped his huge arms securely around my waist from behind, and pulled my back flush against his broad chest. Harrison rested his chin on my shoulder, bearing his face into the crook of my neck, taking a long, contented breath of my scent. "The turkey smells amazing, Matthew," he murmured, his deep voice vibrating against my skin. He pressed a soft, lingering kiss to my pulse point. "But the movie is starting. Come sit with me." I leaned back into his embrace, placing my hands over his massive ones, feeling the solid, undeniable reality of the life we had built. I turned the stove down to a low simmer, smiled, and let him lead me out of the kitchen. The road ahead in New York would always be chaotic, unpredictable, and demanding. I did not know exactly what the future held for an ordinary alpha and a Wall Street enigma. But as we walked into the sunlit living room together, the door to that future was wide open, and for the first time in my life, it was wonderfully perfectly warm.